People often say that plastic surgery is the ultimate form of vanity for women who refuse to age. But for me, the scalpel was not a beauty tool, it was a weapon of war. My ex-husband Julian Thorne did not just divorce me, he severed the brake lines of my car and watched me burn in a ravine 3 months ago. He thinks the fire erased Sarah Miller from the face of the earth along with her claim to the $5 billion patent. He is wrong. The fire only burned away the weakness and forged a demon named Elena Vance. Tonight I am using the very life insurance money he paid out to buy a new face, a new identity, and a front-row seat to his destruction. The grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel smelled of expensive perfume and old money. Crystal chandeliers trembled under the bass of the orchestral music as 500 of New York's elite applauded the man standing on the podium. Julian Thorne held the Golden Caduceus Award high above his head, his smile practiced and perfect for the cameras. He looked impeccable in his bespoke Italian suit, the very image of a grieving widower who had channeled his pain into a medical breakthrough. I stood in the shadows of the velvet curtains, my hand gripping the stem of my champagne flute, so hard I thought the glass would snap. I watched him wipe a non-existent tear from his eye as he leaned into the microphone. He dedicated this award to his late wife Sarah, whose tragic accident had inspired him to work harder on Project Phoenix. The audacity of the man made my stomach churn. He was using my death to market the anti-aging serum I had invented in our basement while he was busy sleeping with his secretary. I took a deep breath and adjusted the strap of my crimson dress. This was not the time for emotions. Emotions were for Sarah, and Sarah was dead. I was Elena Vance now. I was a venture capitalist from Monaco with a net worth that could buy and sell everyone in this room. I stepped out of the shadows, and the rhythm of my heels clicking against the marble floor sounded like a countdown. The dress I wore was a calculated tactical strike. It was cut low enough to distract and red enough to signal danger. Heads turned as I walked down the center aisle. The whispers started immediately. Men looked with hunger and women looked with envy. I did not flinch. I kept my eyes locked on Julian. I needed to get close to him. I needed to look into his eyes and make sure he did not see the ghost of the woman he murdered. A security guard stepped into my path, his hand raised to stop me. He was large and imposed a physical barrier between me and the stage. I did not stop walking. I simply held up a black invitation card with gold, embossing the highest tier of access available for this gala. He glanced at the card and then at my face. His demeanor shifted from aggression to subservience in a split second. He stepped aside and bowed his head slightly. I walked past him without a word. Power in this city was not about muscle, it was about access. I reached the VIP circle just as Julian was descending the stairs from the stage. He was surrounded by a swarm of reporters and sycophants, all trying to get a quote or a handshake. I waited for my moment. I waited for the exact second his eyes would wander, looking for his next conquest or his next investor. Our eyes met. He stopped mid-sentence. For a terrifying second, I thought he recognized me. I thought he saw Sarah behind the blue contact lenses and the reconstructed cheekbones. But then his gaze shifted. He looked me up and down, stripping me with his eyes in that disgusting way he always had. He did not see a threat. He saw a prize. He saw fresh meat. I smiled a small, cold smile that did not reach my eyes. I navigated through the crowd of reporters, my movements fluid and precise. I extended a gloved hand towards him, ignoring the desperate journalists trying to shove microphones in my face. "Mr. Thorne," I said. My voice was different now. I had trained for weeks to lower my register to remove the Midwestern twang of Sarah and replace it with the transatlantic lilt of Elena. That was a moving speech. It almost sounded sincere. The insult was wrapped in velvet. Julian blinked, surprised by the boldness of the statement. He took my hand and his grip was firm, warm, and revoltingly familiar. He held it a fraction of a second longer than was appropriate. "I assure you, madam, my grief is as real as the work we do at Thorne Biotech." And you are? Elena Vance. I withdrew my hand slowly, letting the silk of my glove drag across his palm. I represent the Grimaldi Trust. We specialize in high-risk, high-reward biomedical investments. I heard you were looking for capital to expand Project Phoenix into the Asian market. The mention of the Grimaldi Trust hit him like a shot of adrenaline. Greed flared in his pupils, dilating them instantly. I knew exactly what he was thinking. He was thinking that his cash flow problems were over. He was thinking that he could manipulate this beautiful rich woman just like he manipulated everyone else. He signaled to his head of security, a brute named Marcus, who I recognized as the man who had tampered with my car. Marcus cleared a path for us, pushing aside a reporter from the Wall Street Journal with unnecessary force. Julian offered me his arm. Elena. What a beautiful name. He purred his voice, dropping to that intimate whisper he used to charm investors and mistresses alike. The Grimaldi Trust is legendary. I am honored that you flew all the way from Monaco to attend my little celebration. I did not fly here for the party, Julian. Can I call you Julian? I asked, stepping closer to him, invading his personal space, just enough to make him uncomfortable yet intrigued. I flew here because I did my due diligence. Your science is brilliant. But your financials? They are bleeding. You are burning through cash faster than you can print it. You need a lifeline. And I am the only person in this room with a checkbook big enough to save you. His smile faltered for a microsecond. I had hit a nerve. I knew his financial situation better than he did, because I had hacked his accounts 3 days ago. He quickly recovered, masking his annoyance with a charming chuckle. You are direct. I like that. American women are usually so tedious with their small talk. But this is hardly the place to discuss balance sheets, Elena. The walls have ears, and the champagne is warm. He was trying to move the location. He wanted to take control of the environment. That was his standard operating procedure. Isolate the target and dominate them. I checked the heavy platinum watch on my wrist. I needed to accelerate the timeline. I could not just be an investor. I had to be a challenge. I do not have time for games, Julian, I said, turning away from him, slightly feigning disinterest. My flight to Zurich leaves at 6 a.m. I came here to see the man behind the myth. If you are just another suit looking for a handout, I can find a dozen other startups in Silicon Valley by breakfast. I started to walk away. It was the oldest trick in the book. The takeaway close. Julian could not resist chasing something that was running away from him. He reached out and grabbed my elbow gently but possessively. Wait, he said, his voice urgent. Do not go. You are right. This place is a circus. But I cannot let you leave New York thinking I am just another suit. Cancel your flight. Or at least delay it. Give me 1 hour. I want to show you the prototypes. The real ones. Not the diluted versions I show the press. I stopped and looked back over my shoulder. Prototypes. I thought the FDA sealed everything pending the patent approval. The FDA does not know everything. He winked, a conspiratorial grin spreading across his face. I keep the best work at my private residence. It is secure. Quiet. And we have a bottle of 1942 Chateau Margaux that is dying to be opened. He was inviting me to the penthouse. The same penthouse where I had lived for 5 years. The same penthouse where I had found another woman's lingerie under our bed. The trap was set. But I had to be careful. If I went there, I would be walking into the lion's den. His apartment was a fortress equipped with biometric locks and surveillance cameras in every room. But that was exactly where I needed to be. The master files for Project Phoenix were not on the company servers. They were on an encrypted hard drive in his wall safe. A safe that required a retina scan and a voice print to open. I needed his eyes. And I needed his voice. A private viewing. I mused, tapping my chin thoughtfully. It sounds unorthodox. My board of directors would not approve of me mixing business with pleasure. Then do not tell them. Julian leaned in close, his breath smelling of mint and expensive scotch. Unless you are afraid, I know I have a reputation, Elena. But I assure you I am strictly professional. Mostly. The arrogance was suffocating. He thought he had me wrapped around his finger. He thought I was considering the moral implications of sleeping with him, while in reality I was calculating the best way to drug him without killing him. I looked him dead in the eye, scanning his face for any sign of the man I once loved. There was nothing. Just a hollow shell of vanity and avarice. I am not afraid of you, Julian, I said, my voice icy and calm. I am afraid you might be wasting my time. But I am curious. And I do enjoy a good vintage. 1 hour. If you bore me, I leave. And if you try anything unprofessional, my security team will turn your penthouse into a parking lot. Julian laughed, a deep, throaty sound that used to make my heart flutter, but now only made my skin crawl. I love a woman with a dangerous streak. My driver is outside. We can take your car or mine. I have my own transport. I lied. I did not want to get into a car with his driver, Marcus. That man had the instincts of a pit bull, and he might smell the fear on me. Text me the address. I will meet you there in 20 minutes. I pulled my arm free from his grasp and walked away before he could argue. I needed space to breathe. I needed to stabilize my heart rate. My smartwatch was vibrating against my wrist, warning me that my pulse was over 120 beats per minute. I pushed through the crowd, heading for the exit. The cold night air of Central Park South hit me like a slap in the face. I signaled for my valet. As I waited for my rental limousine, I pulled out my burner phone. I typed a message to the only person in the world who knew I was alive, my family's old lawyer, Arthur. Target acquired. He took the bait. I am going to the apartment. The reply came instant and stark. Too dangerous. He has upgraded the security system since the fire. Thermal sensors. Motion detectors. If you enter with a weapon, the alarms will trigger silent notification to the police. I stared at the screen. Of course he had. Paranoia was his mistress. I typed back. I am not bringing a weapon, Arthur. I am the weapon. The valet pulled up with my black sedan. I tipped him $100 bill and slid into the back seat. The leather was cold. I checked my clutch bag. Inside was a small vial of a transparent liquid disguised as perfume. It was a potent neurotoxin derived from pufferfish venom. It would not kill him, but it would induce temporary paralysis and dilated pupils. Perfect for a retina scan. Assuming I could get close enough to administer it without him noticing. My phone buzzed again. It was a text from an unknown number. 15 Central Park West. Penthouse B. Do not keep me waiting, Elena. I am opening the wine. I stared at the address. It was the home I had decorated. The home where I had cried myself to sleep. The home where he had planned my murder. A wave of nausea washed over me, but I swallowed it down. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. The face staring back at me was beautiful, flawless, and utterly foreign. Sarah Miller was a victim. Elena Vance was an executioner. I tapped the driver on the shoulder. 15 Central Park West. I said. and drive fast." The car pulled away into the traffic of Manhattan. I watched the city lights blur past a kaleidoscope of neon and concrete. I was voluntarily walking back into hell. But this time I was bringing the matches. He thinks he is luring a wealthy investor into his bed to secure his empire. He has no idea he just invited the only witness to his crime back to the scene of the betrayal. But Julian is not stupid. He has a habit of testing his guests. Does Elena know the layout of the penthouse too well? Will her muscle memory betray her when she reaches for a light switch that used to be there? The game of cat and mouse is about to turn deadly behind closed doors. Walking back into the cage where you were murdered is a surreal experience. Most ghosts haunt a house to scare the living. I am haunting this penthouse to destroy the owner. Every piece of furniture in this apartment was bought with my blood money. Every painting on the wall is a testament to his betrayal. But Julian Thorne is about to learn that the only thing scarier than a ghost is a woman who survived hell and came back with a new face and a loaded weapon. The private elevator ascended to the 45th floor with a silent, stomach-churning smoothness. I watched the digital numbers climb and forced my breathing to remain shallow and even. Beside me stood Marcus, the head of security. He smelled of tobacco and gun oil. He was staring at my reflection in the polished brass doors, his eyes narrowing as if trying to solve a puzzle he could not quite name. I ignored him. I adjusted the diamond bracelet on my wrist. It concealed a small ceramic blade, just in case the neurotoxin plan failed. The elevator dinged softly. The doors slid open, to reveal the foyer of Penthouse B. My heart hammered against my ribs, but my face remained a mask of bored indifference. "After you, Ms. Vance." Marcus grunted, stepping aside. I stepped onto the familiar Italian marble floor. The last time I was here, I was begging Julian not to leave me for his secretary. Now I was walking in as a $50 million investment opportunity. The apartment had changed. The warm beige tones I had chosen for the walls were gone, replaced by a stark clinical gray. The antique furniture I loved had been swapped for sharp, angular modern pieces that looked more like torture devices than chairs. It was cold. It felt like a mausoleum. "Elena." Julian's voice boomed from the living room. He was standing by the floor-to-ceiling window holding 2 glasses of red wine. The city skyline twinkled behind him, a backdrop of power and corruption. "Welcome. I trust the ride over was comfortable." "Adequate," I replied, walking towards him. I made sure my heels clicked loudly on the stone. "Your security guard has a staring problem. You might want to train him better." Julian chuckled and waved a dismissive hand at Marcus. "Leave us, Marcus. Wait in the hall." The heavy oak door clicked shut, sealing us inside. The silence that followed was heavy and suffocating. I scanned the room. The thermal sensors Arthur had warned me about were discreetly hidden in the crown molding. Small red lights blinked rhythmically like the eyes of predators in the dark. I needed to keep moving. If I stood still too long, the heat signature analysis might pick up my elevated body temperature and flag me as a threat. 1942, Chateau Margaux. Julian said, extending a glass to me. I let it breathe for exactly 20 minutes. I took the glass. My fingers brushed his. He was watching me closely. His eyes were not looking at my cleavage this time. They were focused on my hands. Sarah Miller had a nervous tic. Whenever she was anxious, she would tap her ring finger against the glass. I held the stem perfectly still. To new ventures, I said, raising the glass. To resurrection, he countered, clinking his glass against mine. The word hung in the air. Did he suspect, or was he just being poetic about his career? I took a sip. The wine was rich and complex, but to me it tasted like ash. Julian took a long drink, his eyes never leaving my face. He walked over to the grand piano in the corner. It was the only piece of furniture he had kept. My piano. The one my father gave me. "Do you play?" he asked, running a hand along the black lacquer. "I prefer to listen." I lied. I could play Rachmaninoff with my eyes closed. But Sarah played. Elena did not. My late wife played. Julian said, his voice dripping with fake melancholy. She was mediocre. Lacked passion. She played the notes, but she never felt the music. The insult stung. I wanted to smash the wineglass into his perfect teeth. Instead, I laughed, a low, throaty sound of amusement. "Sounds like a boring woman. No wonder you are so focused on work." She had her uses. Julian shrugged, turning his back on the piano. She was a brilliant scientist. Just lacked vision. That is why I need a partner like you, Elena. Someone who understands that greatness requires sacrifice. He walked towards me, closing the distance. He was encroaching on my personal space, testing my boundaries. This was the dance. He wanted to see if I would flinch. If I would step back like a prey animal. I did not move. I held my ground and took another sip of wine, looking him dead in the eye. "Sacrifice is just a pretty word for collateral damage, Julian," I said. "Show me the prototype. I did not come here to discuss your dead wife's musical abilities." He smiled. It was a wolfish grin. He liked the aggression. All business. I love that. "Come. The study is this way." He led me down the hallway. We passed the master bedroom. The door was ajar. I caught a glimpse of the bed. It was covered in black silk sheets. Disgust roiled in my stomach. I looked away. We reached the end of the hall. The double doors to his office were made of reinforced steel masked with mahogany veneer. This was the vault. Julian pressed his thumb against a biometric pad on the wall. A green light flashed. Access granted. He pushed the door open and ushered me inside. The office was a shrine to his ego. Magazine covers featuring his face lined the walls. In the center of the room sat a massive glass desk. And behind it, embedded in the wall, was the safe. The steel titanium alloy door was impenetrable without the retina scan and voice authentication. "The Phoenix serum," Julian said, walking behind his desk. He did not open the safe yet. He leaned against the desk, crossing his arms. "Before I show you the future of medicine, Elena, I need to know something." My hand tightened on my clutch bag where the neurotoxin vial waited. "What is it?" "Why me?" he asked. His voice dropped an octave. "There are 100 biotech firms in this city. Why choose a man with a controversial reputation?" It was a test. He wanted his ego stroked, but he also wanted to check my motive. If I said I admired his science, he would know I was lying because the science was not public yet. "Because you are a shark, Julian?" I stepped closer, placing my wine glass on his desk. "And I do not invest in saints. Saints lose money. Sharks eat the competition. I want a killer running my investment." The answer pleased him. He walked around the desk, moving into my personal zone again. He reached out and touched a strand of hair that had fallen onto my shoulder. His touch was electric and repulsive. "You have no idea," he whispered. "I have eaten alive anyone who stood in my way. And I am still hungry." He leaned in as if to kiss me. This was it. The moment. I needed him to open the safe first. I could not drug him yet. If he passed out now, the safe would remain locked. I placed a hand on his chest, pushing him back gently but firmly. First the product, I said, my voice husky. Then the pleasure. Julian groaned, frustrated but intrigued. He pulled back, straightening his tie. You are a cruel woman, Elena. I am a businesswoman, I corrected. He turned towards the wall safe. My heart hammered. He was going to open it. I watched as he leaned down. A blue laser beam scanned his left eye. Retina verified. The robotic voice of the system announced, voice authentication required. The system stated, Alpha, Omega, Phoenix. Julian spoke clearly. Voice verified. Access granted. The heavy steel bolts of the safe retracted with a heavy mechanical clunk. The door swung open slowly. Inside, bathed in cool LED light, sat a single silver hard drive and a small vial of glowing blue liquid. The legacy of Sarah Miller. Behold, Julian said, gesturing to the safe with the flair of a magician. Eternal youth. He turned back to me, expecting awe. Expecting worship. What he got was me reaching into my clutch. It is beautiful, I said. But does it work? I have tested it on subjects. He smiled cruelly. It works. He reached for the vial to show me. This was my chance. He was distracted. His back was partially turned. I uncorked the perfume vial in my hand. The neurotoxin was volatile. I just needed to get it near his face. Show me, I said, stepping right up to him. Let me see the miracle. Julian turned, holding the blue vial up to the light. I was inches from him. I raised my hand, feigning a caress of his cheek. The open bottle of neurotoxin was concealed in my palm. You really are breathtaking, he murmured, leaning in again. Suddenly, the room went red. A siren blared, screaming through the penthouse. Security breach. Weapon detected. The automated voice filled the room. Julian froze. His eyes snapped from the vial to my hand. The thermal sensors. They had picked up the chemical signature of the toxin, or the sudden spike in my adrenaline. He grabbed my wrist, his grip like a vice. What is that? He snarled, his charm vanishing instantly, replaced by the monster I knew. What do you have in your hand? He squeezed. I gasped, dropping the vial. It shattered on the floor. The clear liquid splashed onto the expensive Persian rug. The fumes began to rise immediately. Who are you? Julian roared, twisting my arm behind my back. He shoved me hard against the glass desk. Who sent you? Is it Pfizer? Are you a corporate spy? He did not know who I was. Not yet. But he knew I was an enemy. I was pinned. The gas was rising. The alarms were screaming. Marcus would be bursting through that door in 10 seconds. I had seconds to act. I am not a spy, Julian. I hissed through the pain. I kicked backwards, driving my heel into his shin. He grunted but didn't let go. I used the momentum to slam my head back into his nose. There was a sickening crunch of cartilage. He howled, letting go of my arm to clutch his bleeding face. I spun around. The safe was still open. The hard drive was right there. But Marcus was coming. I could hear heavy footsteps pounding down the hallway. I had a choice. Grab the drive and run or neutralize Julian and finish the job. I looked at Julian. Blood was streaming down his chin, staining his perfect white shirt. He looked at me with pure hate. And then recognition flickered in his eyes. Not of my face, but of the move. The headbutt. It was the only self-defense move Sarah had ever learned. I had practiced it with him playfully in the kitchen years ago. "Sarah," he whispered, horrified. "Impossible." The door burst open. Marcus stood there, gun drawn. The mask has slipped. He saw the ghost in the fighting style. Now Elena is trapped in a sealed room with a bleeding monster and a gunman. The neurotoxin is evaporating into the air, affecting everyone in the room. Who will fall first? The man with the broken nose or the woman holding her breath? Every master thief knows that the perfect heist does not exist. You can plan every second and calculate every angle, but chaos is always waiting in the wings. I had prepared for the locks and the lasers and the ego of a narcissist. But I had not prepared for the muscle memory of a frightened wife to betray the identity of a vengeful ghost. The moment I headbutted Julian, I signed a death warrant for Elena Vance. Now I just have to make sure I do not die twice. The smell of bitter almonds filled the air as the neurotoxin evaporated from the Persian rug. It was a terrifying scent because I knew exactly what it signaled. Marcus stood in the doorway with his gun raised and his finger tightening on the trigger. He was a mountain of a man trained to kill without hesitation, but he made a critical mistake. He took a deep breath to shout a warning. I watched his eyes widen as the gas hit his nervous system. The pupils dilated instantly, swallowing the irises in black pools of confusion. His aim wavered. The gun barrel drifted to the left just as I dove behind the heavy oak desk. A gunshot deafened me. The bullet smashed into the tempered glass behind Julian, turning his ego wall of magazine covers into a shower of razor-sharp confetti. Julian was screaming. He was clutching his broken nose with one hand and waving blindly with the other. The blood streaming through his fingers was dark and thick. He was shouting my name. Not Elena. Sarah. The sound of my dead name coming from his lips sent a jolt of ice through my veins that was colder than the liquid nitrogen in his labs. I crouched low, holding my breath until my lungs burned. The neurotoxin was heavy and settled low, but the concentration was highest near the spill. I had maybe 30 seconds before the room became a gas chamber for everyone, including me. I needed the drive. It was sitting inside the open safe, gleaming silver and innocent. It was the only proof of his theft and my genius. I crawled forward, ignoring the glass shards digging into my knees. My hand shot out and snatched the hard drive. It felt cold and heavy like a condensed brick of justice. I shoved it into the bodice of my dress, feeling the metal bite into my skin. "Shoot her, Marcus," Julian roared. His voice was thick and gurgling from the blood in his throat. "Block the door. Do not let her leave." Marcus stumbled forward. He looked like a drunk man trying to walk on a ship deck in a storm. The toxin was shutting down his motor functions. He fired again, but the shot went wild, embedding itself in the ceiling. Plaster rained down like snow. I saw my opening. Marcus was blocking the only exit to the hallway. But I knew this apartment better than the architects who built it. I knew that Julian had installed a hidden panic panel behind the bookshelf during his paranoia phase 3 years ago. It led to the service corridor used by the maid staff. A corridor he never walked because he considered it beneath him. I grabbed the heavy bronze statue of Atlas from the desk. It weighed 10 pounds. I did not hesitate. I hurled it at the window overlooking Central Park. The impact did not break the bulletproof glass, but it created a massive spiderweb fracture that distracted Julian. He flinched, thinking I was coming for him. In that split second of confusion, I bolted for the bookshelf. "She is going for the panic room," Julian yelled. He wiped the blood from his eyes, trying to focus. He lunges at me. He was fast for a man who had just inhaled a neurotoxin. His hand caught the back of my dress. The fabric tore with a sickening rip. I spun around and drove my palm into his chest, pushing him back. He slipped on the spilled wine and the glass shards crashing to the floor in a heap of expensive soot and broken pride. "You are dead, Sarah," he hissed. He was looking up at me, and his eyes were full of a terrifying realization. "I watched you burn." "You watched a car burn, Julian," I said. My voice was calm despite the chaos. "You never checked the teeth." I pulled the book titled The Art of War. It was a cliché trigger for a cliché man. The mechanism clicked. The bookshelf swung open, revealing the dark, narrow passage of the service corridor. I slipped inside and slammed the panel shut, just as another bullet splintered the wood where my head had been a second ago. Darkness swallowed me. The air here was stale and smelled of dust and old secrets. I did not need light. I ran my hand along the wall, counting the steps. 12 paces to the service elevator. But the elevator would be a trap. If Julian triggered the building lockdown, the elevators would ground themselves, and I would be trapped in a steel box waiting for the police. I ignored the call button and pushed through the heavy fire door into the stairwell. My heels were a liability now. I stopped for 1 second to kick them off. I ran barefoot on the cold concrete stairs. 45 floors. I could not run down 45 floors before Marcus regained his senses and alerted the lobby security. I needed an alternative. I stopped at the 40th floor. This floor was currently under renovation. I knew this because I had seen the construction permits on the lobby notice board when I entered. It was a detail most people ignored, but I was trained to notice variables. I pushed the door open. The floor was a skeleton of steel beams and plastic sheeting. It was empty and silent save for the wind whistling through unsealed windows. I ran to the north side of the building. Below me, the city of New York was a grid of golden lights, oblivious to the war being fought in the sky. My phone vibrated against my hip. It was Arthur. Building lockdown initiated. Police are 2 minutes out. Julian has reported an armed robbery. Armed robbery. Of course. He would not report his wife returning from the dead. He would paint me as a thief to justify his security team shooting me on sight. I was trapped. The lobby would be swarming with cops. The roof would be secured by his private team. I had one way out. The construction lift. I looked over the edge of the unfinished balcony. An external construction elevator clung to the side of the building like a metal parasite. It was used to haul drywall and steel beams. It was crude and loud and dangerous. And it was my only ticket to the ground. I climbed over the safety railing. The wind at this height was brutal. It whipped my hair across my face, blinding me. My bare feet slipped on the icy metal scaffold. I gritted my teeth and swung my leg over, dropping onto the mesh platform of the lift. It shook violently under my weight. I scrambled to the control box. It was locked with a padlock. I cursed under my breath. I looked around for a tool. A discarded crowbar lay near a stack of drywall. I grabbed it and smashed the lock. 1 strike. 2 strikes. The metal groaned and gave way. I yanked the cage door open and slammed the green down button. The gears ground together with a screech that sounded like a dying animal. The lift jerked and began to descend. It was agonizingly slow. I looked up. High above on the penthouse balcony, a figure appeared. It was Marcus. He had recovered enough to track me. He raised his gun. A bullet sparked off the metal railing inches from my hand. I flattened myself against the floor of the cage, trying to make myself as small as possible. The lift descended past the 35th floor. Another shot rang out. This one hit the control box. Sparks showered down on me. The lift shuddered and stopped. I was dangling 300 feet above the pavement. A sitting duck. I looked up. Marcus was leaning over, aiming carefully for a kill shot. He was not trying to arrest me. He was cleaning up a loose end. "Come on," I whispered, hitting the control box with the crowbar. "Move." The lift remained dead. I looked at the building wall. There was a window ledge about 4 feet away. It was the bathroom window of an apartment on the 34th floor. The window was slightly ajar. Someone had left it open to let out steam or smoke. I stood up. The wind threatened to peel me off the platform. I had to jump. In a torn dress, barefoot, with $5 billion tucked against my ribs, I took a breath. I thought about the fire. I thought about the pain of the skin grafts. I thought about Julian's face when he realized I had won. Rage is a powerful fuel. It burns hotter than fear. I leaped. For a second, I was weightless, suspended in the void of the city night. Then I slammed into the brick wall. My fingers clawed at the stone ledge. My nails broke. The pain was sharp and immediate. I scrambled for purchase, kicking my legs until my foot found a drain pipe. I hauled myself up, gasping for air, and tumbled through the open window onto a plush bath mat. I lay there for a moment, staring at the ceiling. The room smelled of lavender bath salts. I rolled over and vomited bile onto the tile floor. My body was shaking uncontrollably. The adrenaline crash was hitting me. But I could not stop. I was inside an occupied apartment. "Honey, is that you?" A voice called from the bedroom. "Did you forget your keys again?" I froze. I stood up silently. I caught my reflection in the bathroom mirror. My dress was in tatters. My hair was wild. I looked like a refugee from a war zone. I grabbed a silk bathrobe hanging on the door and wrapped it around myself, covering the torn red dress. I opened the bathroom door and walked straight towards the apartment exit. A man was sitting in bed watching television. He looked up, confused. "Who the hell are you?" "I am the ghost of Christmas past," I said, keeping my face shadowed. "Go back to sleep." I walked out the front door before he could process the intrusion. I was in the residential hallway of the 34th floor. This was below the lockdown zone. The elevators here were still working. I pressed the call button. The doors opened immediately. I stepped inside and pressed the button for the garage. As the elevator descended, I pulled the hard drive out of my dress. It was warm from my body heat. I checked it for damage. It looked intact. I had the code. Now I needed to destroy the man. The elevator opened into the parking garage. It was quiet. I walked briskly towards the exit, keeping my head down. I did not have a car. I walked out onto the street, blending into the shadows. The front of the building was a circus of flashing red and blue lights. Police cars blocked the entrance. I saw Julian being led out by paramedics. He had a bandage on his nose. He was talking to a police captain, gesturing wildly towards the roof. He thought I was still up there, trapped in the construction lift. I hailed a yellow taxi on Columbus Avenue. The driver looked at my bare feet and the silk robe, but he did not ask questions. In New York, money explains everything. I handed him a wet $100 bill from my pocket. "Where to, lady?" he asked. "The Bronx," I said. "And take the long way." I leaned back against the vinyl seat and closed my eyes. My body ached. My feet were bleeding. but I started to laugh. A low, manic laugh that bubbled up from my chest. I had walked into the lion's den and stolen his teeth. My phone buzzed. A text from Julian. "You can run, Sarah. But you cannot hide. I have your DNA from the glass. The hunt is on." I looked at the message. He was trying to scare me. He wanted me to panic. I typed a reply, my fingers steady. "You do not hunt the hunter, Julian. You just pray she misses." I tossed the burner phone out the window. It shattered on the asphalt, disappearing under the wheels of the traffic behind us. I watched the city lights fade. The first battle was over. But the war had just begun. He thinks DNA is his trump card. He thinks he can track a dead woman through the system. But Julian forgets one thing. When you buy a new face, you also buy a new history. The DNA he found belongs to Elena Vance, a woman who does not exist in any database he can access. But now that he knows Sarah is alive, he will unleash every demon in his payroll to find her. The question is not if he will find her, but what she will do when he does. Victory feels like adrenaline, but survival feels like acid. I had the prize in my hands, a silver brick of data worth billions. But in the world of corporate espionage, possession is only 9/10 of the law. The remaining 10th is the encryption key. And Julian Thorne is the kind of man who locks his secrets behind doors that do not just stay shut, they bite the hand that tries to open them. The taxi dropped me off on a street corner in the South Bronx, where the streetlights had been shot out years ago. I waited until the taillights disappeared around the corner before I moved. The pavement was rough against my bleeding feet. I pulled the stolen silk robe tighter around my shivering body. I was not Elena Vance here. I was just another shadow in a neighborhood full of ghosts. I limped down an alleyway that smelled of rotting garbage and stale beer. At the end was a rusted metal door marked with a condemned sign. This was my safe house. A basement storage unit I had rented 6 months ago under the name of a dead woman. I keyed in the code on the keypad. 1984. The lock buzzed and clicked. I shoved the door open and stumbled inside. The air was dry and smelled of dust and ozone. I flipped the switch. A single naked bulb flickered to life, revealing a cot, a first aid kit, and a high-performance server rack humming in the corner. This was my war room. I did not collapse on the cot. I did not cry. I went straight to the first aid kit. I sat on the cold concrete floor and examined my feet. The soles were shredded. Glass and gravel were embedded in the skin. I grabbed a bottle of isopropyl alcohol and a pair of tweezers. I did not hesitate. I poured the alcohol directly onto the wounds. The pain was white and blinding. It seared through my nervous system like a lightning strike. I bit down on a leather strap I kept for this purpose, stifling a scream that would have woken the dead. My vision blurred, but I forced my hands to be steady. I pulled out the shards one by one, dropping them into a metal bowl. Clink. 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 The sound marked the rhythm of my survival. I wrapped my feet in sterile gauze and secured them with duct tape. Pain was just information. And right now, the information told me I was alive. I limped over to the desk. My fingers were trembling, but not from fear. It was the crash after the chemical high. I needed to focus. I pulled the hard drive from my bodice. It was warm against my skin. I set it down on the desk next to my custom-built decryption rig. This computer was a beast. I had built it with parts stolen from the dark web designed to crack military-grade firewalls. If Julian's drive could be opened, this machine would do it. I plugged the drive in. The fans on my server roared to life. The screen remained black for a long 10 seconds. Then a single green cursor began to blink. Drive detected. Thorne Biotech Secure Archive. "Hello, beautiful," I whispered. I began the attack sequence. My fingers flew across the mechanical keyboard. I ran a brute force algorithm, targeting the standard 256-bit encryption. It was like trying to knock down a steel door with a feather. The drive did not budge. I switched tactics. I deployed a packet sniffer to analyze the data structure. That is when I saw it. The code was not static. It was shifting. Every time my software tried to latch onto a key, the encryption algorithm mutated. It was a polymorphic lock, a masterpiece of paranoia. "You clever bastard," I muttered. I leaned closer to the screen. The code looked familiar. It had a rhythm, a syntax that I recognized. It was based on the DNA sequencing algorithms I had written for Project Phoenix. Julian had used my own genius to lock me out of my life. He had turned my work into a cage. I typed in a command to bypass the biometric layer. The screen flashed red. A text box appeared. Identity confirmation required. Input subject 0 parameters. Subject 0. That was me. That was Sarah Miller. He wanted my biological data. But not just any data. He wanted the specific genetic markers that made my blood unique. The markers that made me the only compatible donor for his son's rare blood condition years ago. A secret I had never told anyone. I paused. If I input the data, I would prove that Sarah Miller was accessing the drive. But if I did not, the drive would remain a brick. I had to risk it. I typed in the genetic sequence from memory. Adenine. Cytosine. Guanine. Thymine. The sequence of my soul. The screen flickered. Access granted. I exhaled a breath I did not know I was holding. The file directory opened. Folders upon folders of illegal clinical trials, bribery ledgers, and offshore accounts. It was all here. The smoking gun that would send him to federal prison for 1,000 years. I moved the mouse to copy the files to my local server. Suddenly the screen turned a violent shade of crimson. A skull icon appeared in the center. It was pixelated and laughing. Trap triggered. Geolocation beacon activated. My blood ran cold. It was not just a lock. It was a lure. Julian knew I would try to crack it. He knew only Sarah could input that code. And the moment I did, I had pinged my exact location to his security grid. I ripped the cord from the wall. The screen went black. But it was too late. The beacon was hardware-based. It had its own power source inside the drive casing. I grabbed the drive and threw it across the room. It hit the concrete wall with a heavy thud. I looked at my monitors. I had tapped into the NYPD dispatch frequency as a precaution. The radio chatter spiked instantly. "Dispatch, we have a priority signal from Thorne Biotech. Tracing a stolen high-value asset to a location in the South Bronx. Intersection of Willis and 3rd. Suspect is armed and extremely dangerous. Willis and 3rd. That was right above my head. They are already here. I said to the empty room. I stood up, ignoring the agony in my feet. I had to leave. Now. But I could not leave the drive. If they got it back, I lost my only leverage. And I could not take my server. I grabbed the hard drive from the floor. I grabbed a hammer from the tool belt on the table. I smashed my own computer tower. I destroyed the hard drives. I shattered the memory chips. I could not leave any digital footprint that led back to Elena Vance. I heard tires screeching on the pavement above. Heavy boots hit the ground. They were not waiting for a warrant. Julian had sent a private hit squad mixed with bought-off cops. I grabbed a backpack. I shoved the silver drive inside. I threw in a burner phone, a wad of cash, and a Glock 19 I had taped under the desk. I was not a killer. But tonight I might have to be. I ran to the back of the storage unit. There was a ventilation shaft that led to the subway tunnels. It was tight, dirty, and infested with rats. It was my only way out. I pulled the grate loose. The sound of a battering ram hitting the front door echoed through the basement. The metal door groaned. It buckled. I squeezed into the shaft, dragging my bag behind me. The air was thick with the smell of rust and sewage. I crawled on my elbows, my knees scraping against the galvanized steel. Behind me, I heard the crash of the door giving way. "Clear the room." A voice shouted. "Find the drive." "Boss, the computer is smashed." Another voice replied. "But the sensor says the asset is moving." "It is in the walls." "Flushed her out," the first voice said. "She is in the vents." "Gas it." My eyes widened in the dark. Gas. They were going to pump tear gas or something worse into the ventilation system. I scrambled faster. I could see a faint light ahead. The subway tunnel. I heard the hiss of pressurized canisters behind me. A white cloud began to creep up the shaft. I reached the end of the vent. It was high up on the wall of the subway station. I kicked the grate out. It fell 10 feet and clattered onto the tracks. I looked down. The third rail was glowing with lethal voltage. A train was coming. I could feel the vibration in the walls. The headlights cut through the gloom. I had to jump. Not onto the platform. Onto the train. I pushed myself out of the vent. I fell through the air. The roof of the subway car was a silver blur rushing beneath me. I hit the metal hard. The impact knocked the wind out of me. I rolled, grabbing onto an air conditioning unit to stop myself from sliding off into the dark. The train accelerated, screaming into the tunnel. I lay flat on the roof of the speeding train, my cheek pressed against the cold, dirty metal. I watched the station lights fade away. I had escaped the trap. But now I was riding a bullet through the veins of the city with no destination and a target painted on my back. She thought she was the hacker, but she was just the user pressing enter on her own execution order. Julian knew Sarah would never destroy the work. He banked on her ego and her curiosity. Now she is riding the number 6 train to nowhere with a tracking device she cannot turn off. But Elena has one advantage left. Julian thinks he is hunting a scientist. He forgets that scientists know how to extract a chip from a circuit board. Or a beacon from a drive. Surgeons call it a steady hand. Snipers call it a breath hold. But there is no name for the kind of stillness you need when you are performing open-heart surgery on a piece of military hardware while clinging to the roof of a subway train moving at 80 miles per hour. My operating theater is a rusted metal roof slick with tunnel grime. My scalpel is a pocket knife I stole from a bodega 3 years ago. And my patient is a hard drive that is currently broadcasting my location to every corrupt cop and mercenary on Julian Thorne's payroll. If I slip, I lose the evidence. If I hesitate, I lose my life. The wind in the tunnel was a physical weight pressing me down against the cold metal of the train car. The darkness rushed by in a blur of concrete and conduit pipes, interrupted only by the rhythmic flash of signal lights that illuminated the terror on my face for a fraction of a second. I lay flat on my stomach, my legs hooked around the air conditioning unit to keep from being swept off into the void. Beneath me, the train rattled and groaned like a beast dying in agony. The vibration was constant, a tooth-rattling shake that made my vision blur. I pulled the silver hard drive from my backpack. The red LED light on the side was blinking rapidly. Blink. 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 It was a countdown. Each flash meant the signal was pinging a satellite, which was pinging Julian's security grid. They knew I was on the 6 line. They would have the next station surrounded. I had maybe 3 minutes before the train slowed down for the Hunts Point stop. 3 minutes to turn this beacon into a ghost. I flipped the blade of my knife open. It was dull and chipped, but it was all I had. I jammed the tip into the seam of the titanium casing. The metal screeched a sound that was lost in the roar of the tunnel. I twisted the knife. The casing held fast. It was sealed with industrial adhesive designed to withstand water, fire, and impact. It was designed to keep people like me out. "Open up, you stubborn bastard." I hissed through my teeth. The train hit a switch in the tracks. The car lurched violently to the left. My body slid across the roof. My fingers slipped. The hard drive flew from my hand, sliding towards the edge of the train. I lunged. My hand slammed down on the metal, trapping the drive inches from the drop. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. I dragged the drive back to me. No more mistakes. I positioned the drive between my knees, clamping it down with my bruised thighs. I grabbed the knife with both hands, using my body weight to drive the blade into the seam. The casing cracked. A hairline fracture appeared along the side. I wedged the blade deeper, levering the metal apart. The seal gave way with a sticky tearing sound. I ripped the top cover off, exposing the green circuit board underneath. The wind threatened to rip the delicate electronics right out of my hands. I squinted against the grit flying in the air. I needed to find the GPS module. It would be a small square chip, likely distinct from the memory banks. I scanned the board. There. Near the power coupling. A black chip with a tiny ceramic antenna labeled Surfstar IV. It was powered by a button cell battery soldered directly to the board, independent of the USB power. That was why it was still pinging. I needed to cut the power trace. A cut too deep would sever the data lines to the memory platters, corrupting the $5 billion secret. A cut too shallow would leave the signal active. I brought the knife tip down. The train was shaking. My hands were shaking. I timed the rhythm of the tracks. Clack, clack. Clack, clack. I exhaled, emptying my lungs to steady my core. I pressed the knife down onto the gold trace, leading to the battery. Scritch. The copper severed. The red light on the side of the drive died instantly. I slumped forward, resting my forehead on the cold metal of the AC unit. The darkness around me was absolute now. No more blinking red eye. I was invisible, but I was not safe. I picked up the exposed circuit board to inspect my handiwork. That was when I saw it. In the space where the GPS battery had been, there was an engraving on the motherboard. It was not a serial number. It was a diagram. A small, intricate etching of a keyhole with a unique hexagonal shape. And next to it, a single word etched in gold. Anastasia. I stared at the name. Anastasia. Not a code. A person. Anastasia Kinsley. The 22-year-old supermodel Julian had been parading around New York as his fiancée for the past 6 months. The tabloids called her the Diamond of Park Avenue. I had seen photos of her wearing a massive hexagonal diamond pendant that Julian had reportedly bought at auction for $10 million. My blood ran cold. The hard drive did not just need a password. It needed a physical hardware key to decrypt the data. A key that was currently hanging around the neck of the most photographed woman in the city. The diamond was not just jewelry. It was a high-tech USB security dongle disguised as a gemstone. "You paranoid genius," I whispered. "You put the key to your empire on a dog collar." The train began to decelerate. The screech of brakes filled the tunnel. The air pressure changed. We were approaching the station. I saw the lights of the platform ahead illuminating the tunnel walls. I could see figures standing on the edge of the platform. Men in tactical gear. They were checking the train cars as they passed. They would check the roof. I could not ride this train into the station. I shoved the exposed drive back into my backpack and zipped it tight. I crawled to the edge of the roof. The ground was a blur of gravel and trash passing by at 40 miles per hour. Jumping at this speed would break bones. But staying meant a bullet in the head. I spotted a maintenance alcove in the tunnel wall just before the platform lights began. A small recess where track workers stood to avoid oncoming trains. It was my only chance. I stood up, crouching low to maintain my center of gravity. I waited. The alcove rushed towards me. 3, 2, 1. I leaped into the darkness. I hit the gravel hard. I tucked my chin to my chest and rolled, letting the momentum carry me. My shoulder slammed into the concrete wall of the alcove. The air left my lungs in a painful whoosh. I lay there in the dirt, gasping for breath as the train roared past me. The wheels screamed inches from my face. Sparks showered down on me, stinging my exposed skin. I pressed myself into the shadows, making myself part of the grime. Through the gaps between the cars, I saw the station platform. It was swarming with police and private security. They were shouting, pointing weapons at the train doors. They expected a woman to step off or be hiding inside. They did not look back into the tunnel. The train finally stopped. The doors opened. I heard shouting. Clear the cars. Check the vents. I did not wait to hear the rest. I pushed myself up. My body screamed in protest. My shoulder throbbed with a dull ache that suggested a deep bruise or a fracture. I ignored it. I limped deeper into the tunnel, away from the light, away from the station. I was walking towards the next stop, heading into the bowels of the Bronx. I had the lock. And now I knew where the key was. I pulled the stolen Glock from my waistband and checked the magazine. Full. I racked the slide, chambering around. The scientist who built encryption algorithms was gone. She died on that roof. The woman walking through the dark tunnel was a thief. And she was going to steal a diamond necklace from the neck of a supermodel. Julian thinks he has won because the signal died. He assumes I dropped the drive or destroyed it in a panic. He will sleep soundly tonight, holding his trophy fiancée close. He does not realize that he is literally sleeping with the enemy's target. The hunt is no longer digital. It is primal. And I am coming for the crown jewels. They say that diamonds are a girl's best friend. In the world of Julian Thorne, they are nothing more than a high-gloss leash used to choke the life out of anything he claims to love. He puts jewels on his women like a rancher brands his cattle, marking his territory with cold carbon and platinum. Anastasia Kinsley thinks she is the queen of Manhattan because she wears $10 million around her neck. She does not realize she is carrying the keys to her own cage. Tonight I am going to show her that the only difference between a necklace and a noose is the velocity at which it is pulled. I emerged from the subway maintenance hatch 3 miles north of the drop zone. The air in Harlem smelled of fried chicken and exhaust fumes, a welcome change from the metallic tang of the third rail. I pulled the hood of a stolen, oversized sweatshirt low over my face, hiding the bruises and the intent in my eyes. I was a ghost walking through the living city, invisible to the commuters rushing home to their warm apartments and safe lives. My shoulder burned with a dull, throbbing ache, where I had slammed into the tunnel wall, and my feet felt like they were walking on broken glass inside the cheap sneakers I had lifted from a sleeping homeless man. Pain was just a signal, and right now I turned the volume down. I needed a place to bleed where no one would ask questions. I navigated the back alleys, avoiding the surveillance cameras on the main avenues, until I reached a nondescript dry-cleaning business on 125th Street. The neon sign buzzed with a dying flicker. I pounded on the metal shutter 3 times, paused, then 2 times more. A moment later, the shutter rolled up just enough for a pair of eyes to peer out. "We are closed," a gruff voice said. "Cut the act, Leo," I whispered, leaning against the cold brick. "I need a stitch and a suit." Leo was a disgraced fashion designer who had lost his empire when Julian Thorne sued him for intellectual property theft 5 years ago. He now ran a black market tailor shop fixing bullet holes in expensive suits for the local triads. He was the only man in New York who hated Julian as much as I did. The shutter rolled up. I slipped inside, collapsing into a chair surrounded by racks of plastic-wrapped garments. Leo looked at me, his face twisting in horror. "You look like you went 12 rounds with a subway train." "Something like that." I grimaced, peeling the sweatshirt off to reveal the purple bruise spreading across my shoulder. "I need you to patch me up. No hospitals. And then I need you to get me into the Met Gala pre-party at the Pierre Hotel tomorrow night." Leo laughed a dry, humorless sound as he grabbed a bottle of vodka and a suture kit from a drawer. "The Pierre, Elena, look at yourself. You are on every wanted list in the city. Julian has his private goons sweeping the streets. You cannot just walk into the most exclusive event of the season." "I am not going to walk in," I hissed as he poured the vodka over my open wound. I gripped the armrest, my knuckles turning white. "I am going to work there. Anastasia Kinsley needs a dresser. Her usual girl had an unfortunate accident an hour ago." Leo paused, the needle hovering over my skin. "You did not." "I did not touch her." I lied through my teeth. But fate has a way of clearing the path for the determined. "I just need credentials, Leo. You still have your contacts in the union." He sighed, shaking his head, but he began to stitch. "You are crazy. The security at the Pierre will be tighter than the Pentagon. Julian will be there. Julian is looking for a sophisticated investor named Elena Vance," I said, watching the needle pierce my skin. "He is not looking for a mute seamstress with gray hair and a limp. I need a disguise, Leo. Make me invisible." 24 hours later, I stood in the service elevator of the Pierre Hotel. My blonde hair was dyed a dull steel gray and pulled back into a severe bun. I wore a shapeless black uniform that swallowed my figure. Thick orthopedic shoes hid my bandaged feet and added a clumsy weight to my step. I carried a garment bag containing a spare dress for Anastasia Kinsley. Leo had come through. I was now Magda, a freelance dresser called in for an emergency wardrobe malfunction. The elevator opened onto the penthouse floor. The hallway was a flurry of activity. Models, assistants, and security guards moved in a chaotic ballet. I kept my head down, clutching the garment bag like a shield. I spotted Marcus standing guard outside the double doors at the end of the hall. He looked pale, recovering from the neurotoxin, but his hand was hovering near his holster. He scanned every face that passed. I shuffled forward, letting my left leg drag slightly. I adopted the posture of a tired, overworked woman who had spent 40 years on her knees pinning hems. I stopped in front of Marcus, holding up my laminate ID badge. "Wardrobe." I rasped, my voice rough and accented. Miss Kinsley called for the backup dress. Marcus looked at the badge, then at my face. He saw wrinkles that were actually latex, and exhaustion that was very real. He did not see the woman who had broken his boss's nose. He sniffed dismissively, waving me through. "Make it quick." He grunted. "They are due downstairs in 20 minutes. I stepped into the suite. It smelled of hairspray and nervous energy. Anastasia Kinsley was standing on a podium in the center of the room, surrounded by 3 assistants who were fussing over the train of her emerald green gown. She was breathtakingly beautiful in that fragile porcelain way that Julian preferred. But it was not her face that drew my eye. It was the necklace, The Anastasia necklace lay against her throat, a sprawling web of platinum and diamonds centering on a massive hexagonal stone that pulsed with cold fire. It was heavy, ostentatious, and undeniably secure. I noted the clasp at the back of her neck. It was not a standard hook. It was a magnetic lock, likely biometric, requiring Julian's fingerprint to release. A literal collar. "Get away from me, you idiots," Anastasia snapped, slapping the hand of a stylist who tried to adjust her strap. "You are pulling it too tight, I can barely breathe." "But Miss Kinsley, Mr. Thorne insists on the silhouette." The stylist stammered. "I do not care what Julian wants," Anastasia screamed, her voice cracking. "Get out, all of you, get out." The room went silent. The assistants looked at each other, terrified. This was my opening. I stepped forward, dropping the garment bag with a heavy thud. "Leave." I commanded, my voice low and authoritative. "The lady needs air. I will finish the fitting." The assistants scrambled for the door, grateful to escape the wrath of the diva. The door clicked shut, leaving me alone with the diamond. Anastasia glared at me, her chest heaving. "Who are you?" she demanded. "I did not hire a grandmother. I am the one who is going to fix your problem," I said, walking towards her. I did not limp anymore. I moved with the predatory grace of a tiger stalking a gazelle. Anastasia took a step back, her arrogance faltering. "What are you doing? Stay back." I stopped 2 feet from her. I looked at the necklace. Up close, I could see the tiny USB port concealed in the setting of the central stone. It was definitely the key. That necklace. I said softly. "It is heavy, isn't it?" Anastasia touched the diamonds, her fingers trembling. "It is a gift. From Julian." "It is a leash, Anastasia," I said, dropping the accent. "Does he let you take it off? Or does he say it is for insurance purposes?" Her eyes widened. I had hit the nerve. "How do you know that?" "Because I used to wear one." I took a step closer. "My name is not Magda. And I am not here to fix your dress. I am here to make you an offer. You give me the necklace and I give you the one thing Julian will never give you." "And what is that?" she whispered, terrified but listening. "Freedom." I reached into my pocket. Anastasia flinched, expecting a weapon. I pulled out a small black device Leo had built for me. It was an electromagnetic pulse generator designed to disrupt magnetic locks. "Julian plans to discard you the moment the merger goes through next month. You are aging out of his demographic. He has already scouted your replacement. A 19-year-old from Milan." "You are lying." Tears welled up in her eyes, ruining her makeup. "Am I?" I pressed on, relentless. "Check his phone. Look at the text messages archived under Project Venus. You know I am right. You have felt him pulling away. You have felt the coldness." Anastasia sobbed, covering her mouth. She knew. Deep down, every woman in Julian's orbit knew when the expiration date was approaching. "I can get this off you." I held up the device. "Right now. Without him knowing. You can walk out of here. Or you can walk downstairs and wait for him to throw you in the trash." Anastasia looked at the mirror, then at the necklace. She hated it. I could see the hatred burning in her eyes. She lifted her chin, exposing the clasp. "Do it," she whispered. I moved behind her. I placed the device against the nape of her neck. I pressed the button. A high-pitched whine filled the air, barely audible. Click. The magnetic seal disengaged. The necklace loosened. The weight fell from her throat. I caught it before it hit the floor. The diamonds felt cold and heavy in my hand. $5 billion. Thank you. Anastasia breathed, rubbing her neck. Do not thank me yet, I said, pocketing the necklace. Now comes the hard part. You have to scream. What? Scream. I ordered, grabbing a pair of scissors from the vanity table. Make it look real. Or he will kill us both. I slashed the back of her dress, ripping the expensive silk. Anastasia understood. She took a deep breath and let out a blood-curdling shriek that would have made a horror movie actress proud. Help, thief. He is killing me. I kicked the chair over, creating chaos. I messed up my hair. I needed to look like I had attacked her. The door burst open. Marcus and 2 other guards rushed in, guns drawn. Get on the ground, Marcus roared, seeing me standing over a weeping, half-naked Anastasia. I raised my hand slowly, holding the scissors. I was not going to fight them. Not here. This was part of the plan. I needed to be taken. But not to jail. I needed to be taken to Julian. I demand to see the boss, I said calmly. I have something of his. Marcus stormed over and pistol-whipped me across the face. The world exploded in white light. I tasted blood. I fell to the floor, my vision swimming. You made a mistake coming here, old woman, Marcus hissed, grabbing me by the collar. Take her to the basement. The boss will want to skin this one himself. They dragged me out. I hung limp in their arms, feigning unconsciousness. My hand was pressed against my side, checking the hidden pocket in my uniform. The necklace was there. I was heading into the belly of the beast. But this time I had the key. And Julian Thorne was about to find out that letting a Trojan horse into his fortress was the last mistake he would ever make. Getting caught was the easy part. Convincing a psychopath that you are a helpless victim while holding the knife to his throat is the art form. I am being dragged to the slaughterhouse, but Marcus does not know that he is carrying a live grenade. The necklace is secure. The drive is secure. Now all I need is 5 minutes alone with Julian and a computer. It is time for a family reunion. There is a certain intimacy in an interrogation room that rivals the bedroom. 2 people stripped of their pretenses, focused entirely on each other, locked in a dance of dominance and submission. Julian Thorne likes to think he is the interrogator. He likes the power of the chair and the fist. But he forgets that a mask works both ways. It hides the victim's fear, but it also hides the executioner's smile. I am tied to a steel chair in the damp basement of the Pierre Hotel, waiting for my husband to come down and kill me. He thinks he is walking into a victory lap. He is walking into a funeral. The basement smelled of wet concrete and industrial cleaning fluid. A single fluorescent light buzzed overhead, casting long, flickering shadows against the cinder block walls. I sat in the center of the room, my wrists zip-tied behind a heavy steel chair. My head hung low, chin resting on my chest. I could feel the blood drying on my cheek where Marcus had struck me. My gray wig was askew, and the latex wrinkles on my face were beginning to itch under the heat of the lamp. I regulated my breathing. Inhale for 4. Hold for 4. Exhale for 4. This was the calm before the storm. I needed my heart rate to be dangerously low. I needed Julian to think I was broken. The heavy iron door groaned open. The click of expensive Italian leather shoes echoed on the concrete floor. I did not look up. I knew that stride. I knew the scent of his cologne, a custom blend of sandalwood and bergamot that cost more than my father's house. Julian Thorne stopped 3 feet in front of me. I could feel his eyes burning into the top of my head. He was silent. That was his favorite tactic. He let the silence stretch until the victim begged for noise. I remained still. Marcus says you stole the necklace. Julian's voice was calm, terrifyingly conversational. He says you attacked my fiancée and cut the diamonds right off her neck. That is a very bold move for a geriatric wardrobe mistress. I said nothing. I let my shoulders slump further, feigning unconsciousness. Wake her up, Julian commanded. A bucket of ice water crashed into my face. The shock was instant and brutal. I gasped, sputtering as the freezing water soaked into the wool uniform. I shook my head, sending droplets flying. I looked up. Julian was standing there immaculate in his tuxedo, holding a crystal tumbler of scotch. He looked at me with a mixture of disgust and curiosity. "Where is it?" he asked, taking a sip of his drink. "Who hired you? Was it Pfizer or maybe the Russians?" "It is in a safe place." I rasped, maintaining the thick accent of Magda. "A place you will never find." Julian laughed. He handed his drink to Marcus and rolled up his sleeves. "You have no idea who you are dealing with. I own this city. I own the police. I own the judges. There is no hole deep enough for you to hide in." He stepped forward and grabbed my jaw, forcing my head back. His grip was painful. He scrutinized my face, looking for the truth in my eyes. "You have pretty eyes for an old woman," he whispered. "They look familiar. Maybe they remind you of someone you killed," I said, dropping the accent entirely. My voice was clear, sharp, and undeniably Sarah. Julian froze. His fingers twitched against my skin. He pulled back as if burned. "What did you say?" I said. I leaned forward, straining against the ties. "You have a terrible memory for faces, Julian. But then again, you never really looked at me, did you? You only looked at the patent numbers." Julian stared at me, his face draining of color. He looked at Marcus, then back at me. "Who is this? Let me show you," I said. "My face itches." I rubbed my cheek against my shoulder, digging the rough fabric of the uniform into the edge of the latex prosthetic. The glue gave way. I peeled the mask back. The synthetic wrinkles tore away, revealing the smooth, reconstructed skin beneath. I shook my head, and the gray wig slid off, hitting the floor with a soft thud. Blonde hair cascaded down my shoulders. I looked up at him. The transformation was complete. Magda was gone. Elena Vance was gone. Sarah Miller sat in the chair, staring into the soul of her murderer. "Hello, Julian." I smiled. "Did you miss me?" Julian stumbled back, knocking over the small metal table beside him. The crash was deafening in the small room. He looked like he had seen a demon. "Sarah?" he whispered. "No. You are dead." I saw the coroner's report. I saw the dental records. "You saw what money can buy," I said. "And you got a bargain. But now the bill is due." Marcus Julian screamed, his voice cracking. "Kill her. Kill her now." Marcus raised his gun, leveling it at my forehead. I did not blink. "Go ahead," I said calmly. "Pull the trigger. And say goodbye to Project Phoenix, forever. I have the hard drive, Julian. And I have the necklace. And right now they are linked to a dead man's switch. If my heart stops beating, a command is sent to the FDA releasing all the data on your illegal human trials. You will go from CEO to inmate number 6 before my body is cold." "Wait," Julian shouted, throwing his hand up to stop Marcus. The gun wavered inches from my face. Julian was breathing heavily, his chest heaving. Greed was warring with fear in his eyes. Greed won. It always won. You have the drive, he asked, licking his lips. I do. I nodded towards the pocket of my uniform. And the necklace is in the other one. I know about the encryption, Julian. I know about Anastasia. Ingenious, really. Using your mistress as a key ring. Julian stepped closer, his eyes darting to my pockets. Give them to me. I cannot unlock it with my hands tied, Julian. I said. And you need me to unlock it. The biometric layer requires a live pulse confirmation from the original creator. That is me. If you try to force it, the data self-destructs. It was a lie. A bluff. But Julian did not know the code. He only knew the architecture. He hesitated. He looked at the server rack in the corner of the room. It was the hotel's secure node, linked directly to his private cloud. Untie her. Julian ordered Marcus. But keep the gun on her temple. If she types one wrong character, blow her brains out. Marcus holstered his pistol and pulled out a knife. He cut the zip ties. My arms fell to my sides, screaming with the sudden return of blood flow. I rubbed my wrists, wincing. I reached into my pockets, slowly, deliberately. I pulled out the silver hard drive and the glittering diamond necklace. Julian's eyes widened. He reached out, but I pulled them back. The computer. I said, pointing to the server terminal. I want to see the transfer complete. I want to know my life's work is safe before I die. You are in no position to make demands. Julian snarled. I am the only one in a position to make demands. I stood up, my legs shaky but holding. Do you want the $5 billion or not? Julian ground his teeth. He gestured to the terminal. Do it. I walked to the desk. Marcus pressed the cold barrel of the gun against the base of my skull. I could feel the heat radiating from his hand. I plugged the hard drive into the USB port. The screen flickered to life. Thorn Biotech Secure Archive. Locked. I held up the necklace. I plugged the hidden connector on the back of the diamond into the side of the hard drive. It clicked satisfyingly. Hardware key detected. Decryption in progress. The screen filled with cascading green code. Files began to unlock. Project Phoenix. Phase 1. Phase 2. Human mortality rates. It is all there. Julian breathed, leaning over my shoulder, his greed making him careless. The formula. The trials. Yes. I said, typing a command string. It is all there. Transfer it to my private cloud. Julian ordered. Now. Transferring. I said. I hit the enter key. A progress bar appeared. Uploading. 10%. 20%. Julian laughed, a manic, triumphant sound. You stupid woman. You thought you could beat me. You just handed me the crown. I did not hand you the crown, Julian. I whispered, watching the percentage climb. I handed you the rope. Upload complete. The screen flashed. But it did not say transfer successful. It said broadcast complete. Julian frowned. Broadcast, what does that mean? Suddenly his phone buzzed. Then Marcus's phone. Then the landline on the wall began to ring. Above us, the muffled sound of chaos erupted from the ballroom floor. I turned to face him, a smile spreading across my face. I did not upload it to your cloud, Julian. I uploaded it to the LED screens in the ballroom upstairs. and to the Times Square Jumbotron, and to the NYPD evidence server. Julian's face went white. He looked at the screen where a live feed from the ballroom showed guests gasping, pointing at the massive screens displaying his death count. "What have you done?" he whispered. "I told you," I said, grabbing the diamond necklace from the drive. "I gave you a resurrection. Just not the one you wanted." He wanted the world to see his genius. I gave him his wish. Every crime, every lie, every drop of blood is now playing in high definition for the entire world to see. But a wounded animal is most dangerous when it is cornered. The truth is out, but we are still locked in a basement with a gun. The court of public opinion has delivered its verdict, but the executioner is standing right behind me. When a man loses his fortune, he loses his friends. When he loses his reputation, he loses his power. But when he loses his hope, he loses his humanity. Julian Thorne has spent his life building a fortress of money to protect himself from the consequences of his actions. But I just detonated the foundation. The walls are coming down and there is no exit door. The only thing left in the rubble is a man who realizes that if he cannot rule the world, he might as well burn it to the ground. The basement was filled with the deafening sound of a ringtone echoing against the concrete walls. It was not just one phone. It was every device in the room screaming in unison. Julian stood frozen, staring at the monitor where the live feed from the ballroom showed chaos. Guests were checking their phones, whispering, pointing at the massive LED screens that were now scrolling through the autopsy reports of the illegal trial subjects. His empire was collapsing in real time. The stock price of Thorne Biotech was free-falling on the Asian markets, which had just opened. I could see the numbers flashing red on the bottom of the screen. Down 20%. Down 40%. He was losing millions of dollars every second. "Kill her," Julian whispered. His voice was hollow, stripped of all its usual arrogance. He did not look at me. He looked at the screen, watching his legacy turn to ash. "Marcus, put a bullet in her head. Right now." Marcus did not move. He held the gun steady, but his finger was not on the trigger. He was looking at his own phone, which was vibrating in his left hand. He looked at the screen, then at Julian. I knew what he was seeing. The news alert. The freezing of assets. The warrants issued. "Did you hear me?" Julian turned slowly, his eyes wild and bloodshot. He looked like a rabid dog cornered in an alley. "I gave you an order. Shoot this bitch and let's go. We take the chopper to the airfield." "The chopper is grounded, boss," Marcus said, his voice flat. He holstered his gun. And my paycheck just bounced. I got a notification from the bank. "Account frozen due to federal investigation. I will pay you double." Julian stepped forward, his hands shaking. "Triple. Just kill her." With what Marcus sneered, taking a step back towards the door. "You are toxic assets now, Mr. Thorne. I am not catching a murder charge for a man who cannot afford a lawyer. I am out." Marcus turned his back on the billionaire. It was the ultimate insult. The hired muscle walking away because the money had dried up. Julian let out a sound that was not human. It was a guttural roar of pure, impotent rage. He scanned the room for a weapon. His eyes landed on a fire axe mounted on the wall inside a glass case. "If you won't do it," Julian hissed, grabbing the handle of the case. "I will do it myself." He smashed the glass with his elbow. Shards rained down onto the concrete. He grabbed the red handle of the axe. I did not wait to see him swing it. I kicked the steel chair backwards, creating an obstacle between us. I turned and sprinted for the door Marcus had left open. "Sarah." Julian screamed behind me. "Come back here. You belong to me." I burst into the service corridor. The air was cooler here, but it smelled of danger. I could hear his heavy footsteps pounding on the concrete behind me. He was fast. Adrenaline and madness were fueling him. I ran past the laundry rooms where massive machines tumbled white sheets like ghosts in a storm. I saw a service elevator, but the call button was lit red. It was busy. I could not wait. I pushed through the double doors leading to the kitchen. The kitchen of the pier was a hive of activity. Dozens of chefs in white coats were shouting orders amidst clouds of steam and the clatter of pans. I ran through the center of the line, my bare feet slipping on the greasy tile. "Out of the way." I shouted, pushing a sous chef aside. "Hey, watch it." He yelled, dropping a tray of silverware. Then Julian burst through the doors. He was a nightmare in a tuxedo. His face was bloody from his broken nose, his tie was undone, and he was dragging a fire axe across the floor. The sparks flew as the metal scraped the tile. The kitchen went silent. The chefs froze, staring at the man they recognized from the magazines, now transformed into a slasher movie villain. "Where is she?" Julian bellowed, swinging the axe. It smashed into a stainless steel prep table, severing a line of carrots and denting the metal. The staff screamed and scattered. I ducked behind a rack of hanging copper pots. I needed to get to the ballroom. I needed witnesses. I needed the cameras. If I died in this kitchen, he could claim self-defense or insanity. But if I died on live television, he could never wash the blood off his hands. I spotted the exit sign. It was on the other side of the hotline. I grabbed a pot of boiling stock from the stove. My hands burned, but I ignored it. As Julian rounded the corner, his eyes locking onto me, I threw the liquid onto the floor between us. "Careful, Julian," I taunted, backing away. "It is slippery when you fall from grace." He lunged, but his expensive leather soles lost traction on the oily soup. He crashed down hard, the axe skittering across the floor. I turned and ran, slamming my shoulder into the swinging doors that led to the ballroom service entrance. I tumbled out onto the plush carpet of the grand ballroom. The transition was jarring. One moment I was in a steam-filled kitchen, the next I was under the glittering lights of 1,000 chandeliers. The music had stopped. The room was buzzing with the murmurs of 500 confused socialites. The massive screens above the stage were still displaying the damning documents I had leaked. I stood up, smoothing my torn uniform. I must have looked like a madwoman. My hair was wild, my face was smeared with grease and blood, and I was barefoot. "Help me," I shouted, my voice cutting through the murmur. "He is trying to kill me." The crowd turned. Hundreds of faces stared at me. Some gasped. Some raised their phones to record. And then the service doors behind me flew open with a bang. Julian stood there. He had lost the axe, but he had found something else. A steak knife snatched from a waiter's tray. He was panting, his chest heaving. Blood dripped from his nose onto his white shirt, creating a gruesome Rorschach test. "Sarah," he said, stepping into the light. He did not see the crowd. He only saw me. "You ruined everything." "I revealed everything," I said, backing towards the stage. "Look around you, Julian. Look at them. They know." Julian blinked. He looked up at the screens. He saw his own signature on a document authorizing the disposal of biological waste, which was actually human remains. He looked at the crowd. He saw the disgust in their eyes. He saw his investors, his rivals, his friends. They were all looking at him like he was a contagion. "No," he whispered, shaking his head. "This is fake. She forged it. She is crazy." He pointed the knife at me. Tell them you lied. Drop the knife, Mr. Thorne. A booming voice amplified by a megaphone cut through the tension. We both turned towards the main entrance. A SWAT team was swarming through the gilded doors. Their tactical gear looked jarring against the silk and velvet of the gala. Red laser dots danced across Julian's chest like fireflies. New York Police Department. The lead officer shouted, moving forward behind a ballistic shield. Drop the weapon and get on your knees. Julian looked at the police. Then he looked at me. A twisted smile spread across his face. It was the smile of a man who realized the game was over and decided to flip the board. You want a show? He laughed softly. I will give you a show. He did not drop the knife. He lunged. But not at the police. He lunged at me. He closed the distance in a second. I tried to dodge, but he was too fast. He grabbed my hair, yanking my head back. He pressed the serrated blade against my throat. Back off. He screamed at the police, using my body as a human shield. Get back, or I open her up right here. The crowd screamed and scrambled for the exits. The police held their fire. They could not shoot. He was too close. His body was behind mine. I could feel his heart hammering against my back. I could smell the sweat and the fear on him. It is over, Julian. I whispered. There is no helicopter. There is no escape. You are going to die in a cage. Then we die together. He hissed in my ear. Till death do us part. Remember. He tightened his grip. The knife bit into my skin. A thin line of blood trickled down my neck. I looked at the police. I looked at the camera crews broadcasting live. And then I looked at the floor. I saw the reflection of the chandelier in the polished wood. And I saw his foot. He was leaning his weight on his back leg, trying to drag me towards the service exit. He was off balance. I remembered the self-defense class I had taken secretly after the first time he hit me. Stomp the instep. Elbow the gut. I lifted my bare foot and brought my heel down with every ounce of strength I had onto the bridge of his foot. He howled in pain. His grip loosened for a fraction of a second. I dropped my weight, bending my knees, and drove my elbow back into his solar plexus. He gasped, doubling over. I spun out of his grip. Take the shot. The police captain yelled. A single gunshot rang out. It was not a kill shot. It was precise. The bullet struck Julian in the right shoulder, shattering his clavicle. The knife clattered to the floor. The force of the impact spun him around and he collapsed onto the red carpet. The SWAT team swarmed him instantly. Suspect down. Secure the weapon. I stood there watching as they handcuffed him. He was screaming, cursing, threatening to sue everyone in the room. He looked pathetic. The monster who had haunted my nightmares was just a broken man bleeding on a rug. A paramedic rushed over to me. Ma'am, are you okay? You are bleeding. I touched my neck. My fingers came away red. I looked at the blood. It was bright. It was real. And it was mine. I am fine, I said. My voice was steady. I am finally fine. They dragged Julian past me. He looked up, his face pressed against the carpet. Our eyes met one last time. I made you. He spat. I created Elena Vance. No, Julian, I said, looking down at him. You killed Sarah Miller. I created myself. The police led him away through the flashing lights of the paparazzi. I stood alone in the center of the ballroom. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind a bone-deep exhaustion. But as I looked around at the shattered remnants of the gala, I realized something. The cage was open. The bird had flown. And the hunter had become the prey. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic. Thorne Biotech declared bankruptcy within 48 hours. Julian was denied bail, deemed a supreme flight risk. The world watched as the king of pharmaceuticals was paraded in an orange jumpsuit. But for me, the story did not end with the click of handcuffs. There is one more loose end to tie. One more person to visit before I can bury Sarah Miller for good. Because victory is not just about destroying your enemy. It is about reclaiming what they stole. Prisons in America are designed to strip a man of his dignity, but they cannot strip him of his ego. That requires a personal touch. Julian Thorne is currently sitting in a 6x8 cell at the Metropolitan Correctional Center waiting for his trial. He thinks he can still maneuver. He thinks he can trade secrets for a reduced sentence. He thinks the game is paused. He does not realize that while he is sitting in a cage counting cockroaches, I am out here counting his money. The takeover is complete. The ink is dry. And today I am going to deliver the eviction notice personally. The visitation room smelled of bleach and despair. It was a sensory vacuum designed to suck the hope out of the air. I sat on a metal stool on the clean side of the bulletproof glass. I smoothed the skirt of my white Chanel suit. White was a deliberate choice. It was the color of mourning in some cultures, but in New York it was the color of untouchable wealth. It said that I was so far removed from the dirt of this place that I could wear the color of snow and not fear a stain. The heavy steel door on the other side buzzed open. Julian shuffled in. The transformation was shocking. The titan of industry who had worn $5,000 suits was now draped in an ill-fitting orange jumpsuit that hung loosely on his frame. His right arm was in a sling pinned against his chest where the police sniper had shattered his clavicle. His hair, usually gelled to perfection, was gray and thinning. He looked 20 years older than he had a month ago. He sat down slowly, wincing as his injury jarred against the table. He picked up the black phone receiver. His hands were shaking. I picked up mine. "You look terrible, Julian," I said. My voice was calm, devoid of the anger that had fueled me for so long. Now there was only pity. The cold, distant pity one feels for a roadkill squirrel. "You came to gloat." Julian's voice was raspy, scratchy, from disuse. He stared at me with eyes that were sunken and dull. "Get it over with. Tell me how smart you are. Tell me how you won." I did not come to gloat. I opened the slim leather portfolio I had placed on the ledge. I pressed a single document against the glass. "I came to do business." Julian squinted at the paper. It was a transfer of ownership deed. "What is this?" he asked. "It is the death certificate of Thorne Biotech," I said. After the scandal, the stock price dropped to 43 cents a share. The board was desperate. They were facing class action lawsuits from the families of the victims. They needed a savior. They needed someone to buy the toxic assets and rebrand the company before the SEC shut them down completely. "Who bought it?" Julian whispered. "Pfizer, Merck." "No." I smiled. "The Grimaldi Trust bought it." "My trust." "I bought your empire for pennies on the dollar, Julian. I own the building. I own the labs. I own the chair you used to sit in. And most importantly, I own Project Phoenix." Julian dropped the phone. It swung on its metal cord, hitting the wall with a dull clank. He stared at me, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. He fumbled to pick the receiver back up. "You cannot do that," he hissed. "That is my company. My name is on the building. Not anymore. I reached into my bag and pulled out a photograph. It was a picture taken this morning. Workers were removing the silver letters THORNE from the skyscraper in Midtown. In their place, a new logo was being hoisted. A golden phoenix rising from the ashes. The company is called Vance Pharmaceuticals now. We are pivoting to ethical restorative medicine. Using the patent, Sarah Miller wrote, but with proper FDA oversight. You stole it. Tears of rage welled in his eyes. You stole my life. I reclaimed my life. I corrected him. You stole 5 years from me, Julian. You stole my face. You stole my trust. I just took the interest payments. And by the way, I spoke to your lawyers. They are dropping you. Apparently the retainer check bounced. Anastasia. He gasped, grasping at straws. She will help me. She has millions in jewelry I gave her. Anastasia is the star witness for the prosecution. I leaned in closer to the glass, my blue eyes locking onto his brown ones. She cut a deal. In exchange for immunity, she handed over the emails where you discussed the brake tampering on my car. She is not going to sell jewelry to save you, Julian. She is going to write a tell-all book about surviving you. It is already a bestseller on pre-order. Julian slumped back in his chair. The fight went out of him. He looked small. He looked finite. The monster was gone, leaving only a pathetic man in a cage. Why are you here, Sarah? He asked softly. If you have everything, why come here? My name is Elena. I stood up, smoothing my jacket. And I came here to say thank you. You were right about one thing. Sarah Miller was weak. She would have forgiven you. She would have moved on. But you killed her. And in doing so, you gave birth to a woman who could run an empire. So thank you for the fire, Julian. It clarified things. I hung up the phone. I turned and walked towards the exit. Elena! He screamed behind the glass. I could hear his muffled voice shouting my name, pounding his good hand against the reinforced window. Elena, come back. You cannot leave me here. I made you. I did not look back. I walked through the heavy doors and out into the sunlight. The air tasted sweet. My driver was waiting by the black limousine. He opened the door for me. Where to, Ms. Vance, he asked. To the office. I said. I have a board meeting at 2. The drive to Midtown was smooth. I watched the city pass by through the tinted windows. New York was a city of predators and prey. For years I had been the prey. Now, as the limousine pulled up to the curb of the building that used to bear my husband's name, I was the apex predator. I walked into the lobby. The security guards, the same ones who used to ignore Sarah Miller, stood at attention. Good afternoon, Ms. Vance. The head of security said, holding the elevator open. Good afternoon, Marcus. I said, Yes, Marcus. He had flipped too. When the money dried up for Julian, I made him an offer he could not refuse. Loyalty in this town is a subscription service, and I had the premium package. The elevator rose to the penthouse floor. The doors opened to the boardroom. 12 men in expensive gray suits sat around the long mahogany table. They were the remnants of the old board, the survivors who had clung to the wreckage. They stopped talking as I entered. They looked at me with a mixture of fear and respect. They knew I was the woman who had brought down a tyrant. I walked to the head of the table. The leather chair was high-backed and imposing. It was Julian's throne. I placed my handbag on the table and sat down. I spun the chair slightly to look out the floor-to-ceiling window. Central Park was a green rectangle far below. The world looked different from this height. "Gentlemen," I said, turning back to face them. "Ms. Vance." The interim chairman cleared his throat. "We were just discussing the rebranding strategy. The public trust is fragile. The public loves a redemption story," I said, my voice echoing in the silent room. "We are going to give them one. We are going to announce that 50% of the profits from Project Phoenix will go to victims of corporate malpractice. We are going to paint ourselves as the saviors who cleaned up Julian Thorne's mess." 50%, a board member choked. "That is significant. The shareholders will riot. The shareholders will do exactly what I tell them to do," I said, my voice hardening into steel. "Because I own 51% of the voting stock. And because without me, this company is just a crime scene. Do we have an understanding?" The room went silent. One by one, they nodded. "Good?" I opened the file in front of me. "Now let's get to work. We have an empire to rebuild." The meeting lasted 3 hours. I dismantled Julian's policies brick by brick. I fired the sycophants. I promoted the scientists who had been marginalized. I reshaped the company in my own image. By the time the sun began to set, painting the sky in hues of purple and gold, I was alone in the office. I walked to the window. I could see my reflection in the glass. The face was Elena Vance. The eyes were Sarah Miller. But the soul was something new. Something forged in fire and cooled in ice. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small velvet pouch. Inside was the diamond necklace. The key. I had bought it back from the police evidence locker. I held it up to the light. It was beautiful and cold. I walked over to the office safe. I punched in a new code. 0824. The date of my accident. The date of my death. The safe opened. I placed the necklace inside next to a pair of old wire-rimmed glasses. My old glasses. Sarah's glasses. I closed the heavy steel door and spun the lock. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Leo. "The dress is ready for the gala tonight." Red again. I smiled. No Leo. Gold. Like the phoenix. I picked up my bag and walked to the door. I paused my hand on the light switch. I looked back at the empty office, at the empty chair, at the ghost of the man who used to rule this world. "Goodbye, Julian," I whispered. I flipped the switch, plunging the room into darkness. I walked out into the light of the hallway, my heels clicking a rhythm of victory on the marble floor. The elevator was waiting. The world was waiting. And for the first time in my life, I was not afraid of what tomorrow would bring. I was Elena Vance. And I was just getting started. The cost of a new face was $500,000. The cost of a new identity was $1 million. But the look on Julian's face when he realized he had lost everything to the wife he murdered, that was priceless. Justice is not blind. Sometimes it just needs a little plastic surgery to see clearly. The Queen is dead. Long live the Queen.